A gracious good day to one and all once again. 'Tis I, Norton the First, by grace of God, Emperor of the United States and Protector of Mexico. Back with you all once again for episode number 173 of Emperor Norton's fantastic history vlog. Today is December 16, 2020. We're covering the 16th through the 22nd on this episode, and it is our 290th day living under COVID-19 restrictions with no end in sight. Well, let us begin with our national days. We'll begin with the 16th. It is the Day of Reconciliation. There's something we could really use right now, eh? The 17th, Wright Brothers Day, the anniversary of the first flight. The 18th, Ugly Christmas Sweater Day. Break out your ugly Christmas sweaters. There's a lot of them. The 19th, National Hard Candy Day. I wonder if that applies to candy cans. I suppose so. It's a hard candy. The 20th, now that was one kind of took me by surprise, National Sangria Day. That's more of a summer drink, isn't it? Maybe it's because citrus is in season. I don't know. The 21st is the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year. But it's also National Flashlight Day. You know, the flesh. The flesh. No, not the fish, the flesh. Animal crackers, Marx Brothers, look it up. And the 22nd is National Cookie Exchange Day. Don't tell that to the Cookie Monster. Let us now move on to our Florida Man segment. Oh, we've got three today. It was hard to choose. Starting with the 18th, Florida man arrested after he attempted to pay for his McDonald's order with weed. That might be legal in California. The 20th, Florida man who marooned himself on Lake Fountain says he took too much MDMA and wanted to be with the swans. It's a good thing he wasn't with the fishes, I suppose. And the 21st, Florida man accused of handing out marijuana to passerby because it was Christmas. Sounds perfectly reasonable to me. Well, let us now move on to our San Francisco stories. As we so often do, we rely on John Ralston's wonderful book, This Date in San Francisco, which we will be reading from. Thank you, John. We'll begin with December 16, 1909. The new Palace Hotel opens 3 years after the earthquake and fire. San Franciscans modestly claimed the original Palace Hotel, opened in 1875, was the finest hotellerie on earth. Certainly was one of the biggest and most elaborate, 270 feet wide on Market Street, 350 feet long on New Montgomery, with 800 guest rooms, hydraulic elevators, and modern plumbing. The palace attracted distinguished guests from all over the world. Rutherford B. Hayes was the first sitting president to stay at the palace. Civil War hero and former President Ulysses S. Grant arrived at the palace on September 20th, 1879. A less fortunate head of state and palace guest was Hawaii's King David Kalakaua, who arrived in San Francisco in January of 1891 and died in a hotel suite, aged just 54. On the morning of April 18, 1906, the palace shook within the earthquake, then stood fortress-like as fires advanced from the south of Market. The designers had provided, even for such a catastrophe, a 675,000-gallon reservoir pumping systems and hoses had been installed, but by mid-afternoon the reservoir was pumped dry and the Palace Hotel was doomed. Only the exterior brick walls remained after the fire. The rooms were leveled and the bricks were dumped into the bay at what is now Aquatic Park. The new palace, designed by architect George Kellum, was built on the site of the original Palace Hotel. On the evening of Wednesday, December 15, 1909, a lavish banquet for 1,200 was held to celebrate the reopening on Thursday. The new Palace Hotel opened for business on Thursday, December 16, 1909. The first guest to register was William Chapman Ralston, the younger son of the palace's builder, William Ralston, who died before his creation opened. Other registered guests from Oakland, Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York were in attendance. An estimated 30,000 members of the general public streamed through the building, so many that at 4 p.m. the management was obliged to restrict entrance. Excuse me, I got lost there. To get entrance to guests only. A star attraction was the Pied Piper mural by Maxfield Parrish, one of the greatest American artists of the 19th and 20th centuries. There was said, the Examiner, only one word to describe it: wonderful. It was a wonderful gathering in a wonderful setting, and a gathering and a spirit typical of a new day, but of the old, merry, undaunted San Francisco spirit. If you have never been to the Palace Hotel, it's well worth seeing, especially the Garden Court Restaurant, the Maxfield Parrish mural. The mural with me on it is right by the bar as well. It is the only establishment, although an earlier Palace Hotel night, not the 1875 one, where we were ever arrested, but that's another story. Well, let's move on to December 18, 1914. The Red Light Abatement Act takes effect. Prostitution came to San Francisco with the gold rush. The city's early population being overwhelmingly male. Heterosexual men depended for sex on prostitutes who arrived almost everywhere, every day, on every ship. Prostitution continued in San Francisco for over 60 years. A rigorous campaign by the Hearst Press, among other things, led to passage of the Red Light Abatement Act, which took effect on December 18, 1914. 3 days after the Red Light Abatement Act took effect, police raided a Grant Avenue brothel staffed with Chinese prostitutes. Brothel owners quickly organized a protective association and applied to the United States District Court for an injunction against the police action, but lost. In 1917, the Supreme Court of the state of California ruled the Abatement Act constitutional. Raids and other pressures ended prostitution on the old Barbary Coast, but the trade itself, of course, did not end. It just moved. In the 1930s and 40s, the famous Madam Sally Stanford operated a string of bordellos catering to upscale clientele, including diplomats who created the United Nations in 1945. More recently, bordellos disguised as massage parlors, staffed with illegal, intimidated immigrants, have operated and operate to this day. In fact, there's one in Chinatown I've come across called L'Amour Spa. They're not even trying to hide it. Our last San Francisco story today is from December 20, 1968. The Zodiac kills his first known victims. David Faraday was a 17-year-old senior at Vallejo High School, Vallejo, Solano County, California. A good student, he competed on the school wrestling team and was an Eagle Scout who held the God and Country Award. He'd began visiting 16-year-old Hogan High junior, messing this one up, Betty Lou Jensen. Both sets of parents were agreeable. About 7:30 p.m. Saturday evening, December 20, 1968, David drove his mother's Rambler station to Betty Lou's house about 2 miles away. The youngsters had indicated they were going to a Christmas concert, but instead they visited a friend of Betty Lou's house about 2 miles away. The youngsters had indicated they were going to a Christmas concert, but instead, I already said that. About 9 p.m., they left and stopped for a Coke. Then David drove the Rambler east out Lake Herman Road, a remote lover's lane outside Vallejo city limits. As the couple nestled, another car pulled alongside. The driver got out. He aimed a small caliber pistol at the Rambler's rear window and fired, shattering the glass. Another shot went into the left wheel well. Terrified, David and Betty Lou bolted, probably what the assailant wanted them to do. As David ran around to the other side of the car, a man pressed the pistol's muzzle against his head and fired a third shot. As Betty Lou ran back down the road, the man shot her 5 times in the back. The evening of the following, July 4th, 1969, 22-year-old Vallejo waitress named Darlene Farron picked up a 19-year-old Mike Mago in her 1963 Chevrolet Corvair, great car, and drove to the parking lot of Blue Rock Springs Golf Course. Farron was married with an infant daughter, but saw other men. The parking lot about 2 miles northwest of Lake Herman Road was another lover's lane. Just after Farron parked, another car pulled up alongside, went away and came back again. A man got out, shining a lantern that practically blinded the couple. The man approached. Mago saw a flash of light from a gun and jerked back toward the rear of the car. Hit. More shots were fired. The man got back in his car and drove off. On July 31st, 1969, 3 separate envelopes arrived at the office of the San Francisco Chronicle, the Examiner, and the Vallejo Times-Herald, each envelope bearing approximately the same handwritten message. Dear editor, I am the killer of the 2 teenagers last Christmas at Lake Herman and the girl last July 4th. To prove this, I shall state some facts that only I and the police know. The sender described the brand of ammunition he used, the number of shots fired, the position of the victims, and several other features. Each letter also contained one part of a 3-part coded message, which the sender claimed would reveal his identity. On Saturday afternoon, September 27, 1969, Cecilia Ann Shepard and Brian Hartnell, students at Pacific Union College, Napa County, California, drove in Hartnell's Volkswagen Karmann Ghia to Lake Berryessa, a popular country recreation area. As they relaxed on the shoreline, a man emerged from behind a tree in a bizarre costume, a hood with slits for eyes and a mouth, emblazoned with a circle and 2 perpendicular lines like crosshairs extended to his waistline. He leveled a gun at the couple had a bayonet-type knife in a scabbard. He told the couple he was an escaped convict, demanded their money and car keys. He then tossed a cord to Cecilia, ordered her to tie up Brian, then tied up Shepard himself. After telling the couple he was going to have to stab them, he did multiple times. Zodiac's next victim was in San Francisco on the night of Saturday, October 11, 1969. Cab driver Paul Stein picked up a mail fare on Geary Street just west of Union Square. As they entered Presidio Heights Park, from behind, the man grabbed Stein around the neck with his left arm, pressed a pistol against the side of his head, and pulled the trigger, killing Stein instantly. 3 days later, a Chronicle mailroom employee opened an envelope and found a letter containing a bloody piece of Stein's shirt. It was from the Zodiac. The Zodiac became to San Francisco what Jack the Ripper was to London, a serial murderer whose identity was never conclusively established. Like Jack the Ripper, he became popular culture. In the 1971 film Dirty Harry, a maverick detective played by Clint Eastwood chases a serial murderer called Scorpio, who sends police taunting letters. In Zodiac's last letter to the Chronicle, received April 24, 1978, he said, "I'm waiting for a good movie about me." I guess he didn't like Dirty Harry. In 2007, Paramount Pictures released Zodiac, based on artist-researcher Robert Graysmith's book, starring Jake Gyllenhaal, hope I pronounced that right, Mark Ruffalo, and Robert Downey Jr. Other references to Zodiac are found in television, books, and countless articles. And there's been a new development in the Zodiac killings. Just recently, they were able to decipher his code. So we still don't know to this day. There are a number of good suspects, most of whom are dead by now, but maybe someday we will find out who was the Zodiac killer. Well, let's move on now to our other history, starting on the 16th of December, 1707, the last recorded eruption of Mount Fuji in Japan. 1773, the Boston Tea Party incident. Sons of Liberty protesters throw tea shipments into Boston Harbor in protest against British-imposed Tea Act. 1826, Benjamin W. Edwards rides into Mexico-controlled Nacogdoches, Texas, and declares himself the ruler of the Republic of Fredonia. Hail, hail, Fredonia, land of the brave and free. I guess his name was actually Rufus D. Firefly. 1969, War is Over If You Want It. Happy Christmas from John and Yoko posters begin appearing, especially around New York City. 1903, how'd I get this screwed up? Okay. The Majestic Theater, New York City, is the first to employ women ushers. In 2004, NASA's Voyager 1 spacecraft was the first to cross the termination shock where solar and interstellar winds merge. And the Voyager 1 and 2 are still out there. Let's move on to the 17th. 1728, Congregation Sheriff Israel of New York, not San Francisco, purchases a lot on Mill Street in Lower Manhattan to build the city's first synagogue. By the way, happy Hanukkah. It's still Hanukkah for a couple more days. 1860, Anaheim Township home of Disneyland, is created in what was then Los Angeles County, now Orange County. 1862, General Ulysses S. Grant issues Order Number 11, expelling Jews from Tennessee. Yes, it happened. 1895, the Anti-Saloon League of America is formed in Washington, D.C. 1903, the Wright brothers make the first sustained motorized aircraft flight at 10:35 a.m., piloted by Orville Wright at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. Also in aviation, 1935, the first flight of the Douglas DC-3, also known as the C-47 airplane, the most successful airplane ever built. Many are still flying to this day. 1975, Lynette Squeaky Fromm is sentenced to life in prison for the attempt on U.S. President Ford's life. She was released in 2009. Let's move on to the 18th, 1912. Piltdown Man, later discovered to be a hoax, is supposedly found in Piltdown gravel pit by Charles Dawson. Big hoax on that one. 1972, the 18th Amendment to the Constitution authorizing prohibition of alcohol is approved by U.S. Congress and sent to the states for ratification. What a huge disaster that was. 1936, Su Lin, first giant panda to come to the U.S. from China, arrives in San Francisco. Bummer and Lazarus are being a little loud today. Hope you're not picking too much of that up. 2019, the U.S. House of Representatives votes to impeach President Donald Trump for abuse of power on a vote of 230 to 197, and obstruction of Congress on a vote of 229 to 198. Moving on to the 19th, 1732, Benjamin Franklin, the only president of the United States who was never president of the United States, under the name of Richard Saunders, begins publication of Poor Richard's Almanac. 1776, Thomas Paine publishes his first American crisis essay, beginning, "These are the times that try men's souls." He could easily be talking about right now. 1843, A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens is published. 6,000 copies are sold. 1859, grading started for the Market Street Railway in San Francisco. 1942, Robert Stroud, the Birdman of Alcatraz, is transferred to Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary, where he had no birds, but wrote his book about bird diseases that is still in use to this day. 1950, the Chinese invasion of Tibet forced the Tibetan spiritual leader, the Dalai Lama, to free. He is still living in exile. 1962, street signs in Golden Gate Park approved by the Park Commission. How did people find their way around before that? I don't know. 1998, the U.S. House of Representatives votes to impeach President Bill Clinton, forwarding the articles of impeachment to the Senate for a trial where he would ultimately not be convicted. Same for Donald Trump, to be fair, I suppose. 2007, the Lakota people, a Native American tribe, proclaim independence and withdraw all their treaties with the United States and establish the Republic of Lakota as a separate country. Let's now move on to the 20th, 1803. The French flag is lowered in New Orleans to mark the formal transfer of the Louisiana Purchase from France to USA for $27 million. 1860, South Carolina declared an independent commonwealth and then secedes from the Union, beginning the U.S. Civil War. 1879, Thomas Edison privately demonstrated incandescent light at Menlo Park, not California, no. 1924, Adolf Hitler freed from jail early, having served only 9 months of the 5-year sentence of the beer hall putsch. 1929, Mount Davidson dedicated as a San Francisco city park. 1968, as we said earlier, the Zodiac killer kills Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday in Vallejo, California. 1971, the first preview issue of Ms. Magazine is published in the U.S., launched by Gloria Steinem. 1978, H.R. Haldeman, Nixon's White House chief of staff, is released from jail where he was serving a term for his crimes related to the Watergate scandal. 1990, the world's first website and server go live at CERN. There you go. 2007, Her Majesty, Queen Elizabeth, becomes the oldest ever monarch of the United Kingdom, surpassing Queen Victoria, who lived 81 years, 7 months, and 29 days, and Queen Elizabeth is still on the throne. Let's move on to the 21st, 1898. French scientists Pierre and Marie Curie discover radium. 1909, first junior high school established in Berkeley, California. 1913, first crossword puzzle with 32 clues is published in New York World. 1952, the Broadway Tunnel opens in San Francisco, providing a direct route from the Fisherman's Wharf area to the Marina District. 1968, David Crosby, Stephen Stills, and Graham Nash premiered together in California, Crosby, Stills, and Nash. 1978, police in Des Plaines, Illinois arrest John Wayne Gacy for murder. 1989, Vice President Dan Quayle sends out 30,000 Christmas cards with the word beacon spelled with a K instead of a C. Well, at least it wasn't the word potato. Moving on to the 22nd, 1849, the execution of Russian writer Dostoevsky by firing squad is called off at the last second. 1877, Thomas Edison again, his phonograph is announced in Scientific American. 1882, the first string of Christmas tree lights created by Thomas Edison. He's in the news a lot today. 1894, French officer Alfred Dreyfus, court-martialed for treason, triggers worldwide charges of anti-Semitism. Dreyfus is later vindicated. 1963, the official 30-day mourning period for President John F. Kennedy ends. 1990, Lech Walesa is sworn in as Poland's first popularly elected president. 2001, Richard Reed attempts to destroy a passenger airliner by igniting explosives hidden in his shoes aboard American Airlines Flight 63, and that's why you still have to take off your shoes to this day, 19 years later. 2010, the repeal of the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy, a 17-year-old policy banning homosexuals serving openly in the U.S. military, signed into law by President Barack Obama. Let us now move on to our births today, starting with the 16th of December, 1770, our favorite composer, Beethoven. Happy birthday, Ludwig, 250 years old today. 1775, author Jane Austen. 1899, Sir Noel Coward. I have been to a marvelous party, but so much more. 1901, anthropologist Margaret Mead. 1917, author Arthur C. Clarke. 1945, Yukio Hattori. You may be wondering. He was the commentator on the Japanese version of Iron Chef. And if you ever get a chance, watch the subtitled versions. They're much better. But please don't watch Iron Chef America. I was so disappointed in that show. Except Alton Brown. He did a good job. Well, let's move on to the 17th. And please don't send letters. Moving on to the 17th, 1824, Reverend Thomas Starr King, very important figure in San Francisco history, delivered fiery speeches for the preservation of the Union in Union Square. He was a Unitarian minister. He's one of the few people legally buried within city limits outside of one of the 3 cemeteries we actually have. He's buried in the yard of his church, actually. It's on Franklin Street, if I remember right. Should have looked that up beforehand. Oh, well. 1894, Arthur Fiedler, the conductor of the Boston Pops Orchestra. 1929, William Safire, American political columnist and speechwriter for Nixon. 1930, Bob Guccione, American publisher of Penthouse magazine. 1936, Pope Francis. Happy birthday, Frankie. 1946, Eugene Levy. Oh, we are watching Schitt's Creek right now. We're about halfway through the series. Great series. Moving on to the 18th, 1778, Joseph Garibaldi, English pantomimist and considered the greatest clown in history. 1863, Franz Ferdinand, Archduke of Austria, whose assassination in 1914 led to declarations of war in World War I. Also the name of one of our favorite bands who collaborated a few years ago with another one of our favorite bands, Sparks, to create Franz Ferdinand Sparks, FFS. It's a great record. Pick it up. I just love it. Listening to it all the time. Oh, well. Let's move on to the 1878, Joseph Stalin. 1879, the artist Paul Klee. 1888, Robert Moses, power broker, built Long Island and New York City parks and roads. It is said he simultaneously saved and destroyed New York City. A very controversial figure. 1916, actor Betty Grable. 1935, French chef Jacques Pepin, who is still with us. 1963, actor Brad Pitt. 1966, actor Kiefer Sutherland. 1980, singer Christina Aguilera. Hope I pronounced that right. But let's move on to the 19th. 1902, Sir Ralph Richardson, one of the big three of the Shakespearean actors. Also John Gielgud and, oh God, he was Obi-Wan Kenobi in Star Wars. Alec Guinness, the big three. 1906, Leonid Brezhnev, former leader of the Soviet Union. 1910, Jean Genet, French novelist and playwright. 1915, this great singer Edith Piaf. 1933, actor Cicely Tyson. 1946, singer Marianne Faithfull. 1960, singer Daryl Hannah. And 1924, I'm screwing up dates today for some reason. Gary Morton, second husband of Lucille Ball, he was also a comedian. 1819, this is moving on to the 20th now. John Geary, American lawyer and politician, first San Francisco postmaster, first American mayor of San Francisco. Geary Boulevard is named in his honor. 1868, Harvey Firestone, American industrialist and founder of Firestone Tire and Rubber Company. 1946, Uri Geller, Israeli magician and, quote, psychic, unquote, known for, quote, bending, unquote, forks. Look up The Amazing Randy, who just passed away recently. You'll learn more about that. They had a little war going for a long, long time, may still, even after The Amazing Randy died. Let's move on to the 21st, 1117, Thomas Becket, our English Archbishop of Canterbury. 1804, Benjamin Disraeli, the first Earl of Beaconsfield, British Prime Minister. In 1879, wait a minute, I said Stalin earlier. That doesn't work. Okay, never mind. 1908, Pat Weaver, American radio advertising executive. He's the one that started The Today Show, which is still broadcasting. 1935, Phil Donahue, talk show host. 1937, Jane Fonda, actor, Oscar winner. 1940, well, happy 80th birthday to Frank Zappa, who we'll come back to later on. We are a big Zappa fan. 1944, I guess now the former conductor of the San Francisco Symphony, Michael Tilson Thomas, who is descended from Yiddish theater royalty. Look up the Tomaszewskis. He had a whole documentary about them. It's quite a story. 1965, Andy Dick, one of only two celebrities I ran into when I was living in West Hollywood, the second being Angeline. Let's move on to the 22nd now, 1899, Hoagy Carmichael, the pianist and composer. 1899, the aviation pioneer Wiley Post. 1905, Kenneth Rexroth, American poet, translator, and critical essayist. He did not like being called a beat, but he was. And you can learn more about him on episode number 168. The Countess talked about him. 1912, Claudia A. Ladybird Taylor Johnson, American First Lady. I never knew that was her real name. 1943, tennis star Billie Jean King. 1945, journalist Diane Sawyer. 1949, Robin Gibb of the Bee Gees. 1960, Jean-Michel Basquiat, American artist. 1970, Ted Cruz. Born in Canada. Remember that if he tries to run for president in 2024. Born in Canada. I'll repeat that. Born in Canada. But let's move on to our deaths today. Beginning in the 16th, 1859, Wilhelm Grimm, Grimm's Fairy Tales. 1935, actress Thelma Todd. She died very young. She was in Horse Feathers with the Marx Brothers, but many other movies as well. She was very good in that. 1965, W. Somerset Maugham, the author. 1980, Colonel Harland Sanders. You remember when he died in 1980? That for a month they served Kentucky Fried Chicken in black buckets. Let's move on to the 17th, 1830, Simon Bolivar, South American revolutionary, president of Colombia, namesake of Bolivia. 2005, journalist Jack Anderson. 2011, Kim Jong-il, supreme leader of North Korea. Moving on to the 18th, 1879, Charlie Parkhurst, American stagecoach driver, who disguised herself as a man for 30 years. Episode 104 talks about Charlie Parkhurst in greater detail. 1972, Nelia, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Hunter, Joe Biden's first wife, and their 13-year-old daughter, Naomi Biden, are killed in an automobile accident a few days before he takes office as a newly elected senator for Delaware. 1997, Chris Farley, no, I've heard he's still living in a van down by the river. 2006, animation pioneer Joseph Barbera. 2018, David Austin, English rose breeder of the Austin Rosers, which are wonderful. Let's move on to the 19th. 1848, Emily Bronte, English novelist. 2017, Clifford Irving, American novelist, investigative reporter. He wrote the hoax autobiography of Howard Hughes that Howard Hughes actually came out of seclusion, well, via telephone, to debunk. But let's move on now to the 20th, 1812, Sacagawea, Shoshone interpreter for the Lewis and Clark expedition, dies at the age of 24. Of course, there's that coin that was done in her honor, the Sacagawea dollar. 1961, Moss Hart, American dramatist, also the husband of Kitty Carlisle. 1968, John Steinbeck, the author of Grapes of Wrath, Nobel Prize winner, 1940. 1973, Bobby Darin, Mac the Knife. 1996, Carl Sagan, American scientist, astronomer, and author. Let's move on now to the 21st, 1940. Writer F. Scott Fitzgerald died at the age of 44. 1945, General George S. Patton, the hero of World War II. Moving on to the 22nd now. 1940, Nathaniel West, author of Day of the Locust and Miss Lonely Hearts. 1943, speaking of authors, Beatrix Potter. 1979, Daryl F. Zanuck, the film producer. And 1989, absurdist playwright Samuel Beckett. We end with a quote today from Frank Zappa. Without deviation from the norm, progress is not possible. We absolutely agree with that. Well, that wraps it up for this edition. Don't forget to tune in on the weekend for our episode with the Countess, as always. Always a great episode. Always good. It's going to be a great one this Saturday, but you got to tune in to find out what it's about. We, of course, accept tips, and we really appreciate our generous donors. Here's where you can do that. You can do a monthly subscription via Patreon or one-time via PayPal and Venmo. Hats off to our donors. We really appreciate it, and in these troubled economic times, donations are much needed. So thank you very much to everyone who has donated. If you'd like more information about the tours that we will be doing again once the pandemic is over, as well as great compendiums for information about San Francisco history, here's where you find out about that. Well, that wraps it up for this edition. Until we see you again, stay safe, stay inside, and therefore stay healthy. We are seeing the post-Thanksgiving spike now, and I'm willing to bet you in mid-January we will see another from Christmas and New Year's. Please stay safe. The vaccine has arrived. We just have to be patient for a little bit longer until we can get inoculated, and then hopefully this will be over. We can get back to what passes for normal. Wear your mask. Also very important to wear that mask. The best way to prevent death and destruction is by wearing your mask. There's a lot of great ones out there now too. Do not take unproven cures that might kill you. Most of all, be kind to one another, especially in these troubled times. Until we see you again, a gracious good day.